After his release, the man saw his grandfather in a dream. He told him to go to a forest cabin. While Jacob Gomez was anxiously awaiting his approaching release, he found himself holding his breath, each passing moment filled with a mix of excitement and anxiety. The walls of the State Penitentiary had been his sole means of escape for 5 hard years, which seemed like a lifetime to him. As the day of his release got closer, Jacob set his goals even higher. He made a serious promise to himself that this was going to be the end of his days in prison. As Jacob headed out on his way home, his house was waiting for him in one of the small towns in the middle of Maine. In comparison to his suffocating prison cell, the town was surrounded on all sides by thick forest. Jacob had a great love for the natural beauty of his home country, even though he was locked up. This love had grown stronger during the long years of isolation. The deep desire to be outside and enjoy the natural beauty of his surroundings had become an important part of his daily routine. While Jacob wasn't destined to become a criminal, he got involved with some bad people by accident and ended up becoming involved with them. He had gone down the wrong path because of the way fate worked. He was determined to cut ties with the ghosts of his past as he pursued forgiveness. Jacob's parents died in a tragic fire when he was young, leaving him without a parent. He found comfort and guidance in his grandfather, Henry Gomez. Henry, who cared for Jacob, built his character by teaching him not only how to survive, but also how to deeply appreciate life's small details. As Jacob looked forward to being free, he couldn't help but think about the life-changing events that had led him to this important point in his life. It was clear that Henry loved his grandson very much, and he wanted to teach Jacob skills that would help him throughout his life. Henry worked hard to teach Jacob how to survive in the wilderness and find his way around new areas. Furthermore, Henry taught Jacob not only how to safely handle firearms, but also how to shoot a weapon with excellent accuracy. Even though Jacob had learned these skills, he didn't really like to use them. As someone who cared deeply about animals and didn't want to hurt them, hunting in particular didn't appeal to him. In the quiet times when Henry and Jacob were alone together, Henry would often say how much he admired Jacob's kind heart. Henry would often give Jacob a gentle pat on the shoulder and say the words, "You have a kind soul, my boy." And he liked this about his grandson. Henry saw an important connection between Jacob's life and the forest and pushed him to explore it. He thought that this connection would help him find his true calling. But Jacob, who was ambitious and wanted to get rich, had a hard time understanding the deep knowledge that was hidden in his grandfather's words. The young man started to be passionate about earning money, which led him to playing poker, gambling, and other games of luck. He thought that these strategies would help him get rich quickly. However, they were different from the peaceful relationship with nature that Henry had envisioned for him. So, it became clear that Henry Gomez's wise lessons were not aligned with Jacob's goals. Who was young and ambitious, dealing with these difficult points of view would eventually shape Jacob's journey, forcing him to face his values and find balance between his ambition and grandfather's desire to build a deeper relationship with nature. But Jacob's dreams turned out to be nothing but lies, and they led him straight to the harsh conditions of the State Penitentiary. When Henry Gomez heard that Jacob had been arrested, it shook him deeply and made him think about how such a bad thing could have happened. "Is this the reality of my grandson's nature?" he asked himself over and over again. On one prison visit, Henry told his grandson, "I have always tried to keep you safe from the dark side of life, but you chose a different path." In his never-ending quest for quick money, Jacob had completely forgotten that he had become involved with another person's hopes and dreams, every day with a constant reminder that the mistake he had made cost him his freedom. He kept replaying the mistake in his thoughts. A big question mark hangs over Jacob's life. What might have happened if his grandfather hadn't been there for him? Without a doubt, Henry's constant encouragement made Jacob's life easier while he was in the dangerous and cruel jail. The old man didn't cut back on money or effort. He made regular trips to see his grandson, who also never showed up empty-handed. He always brought Jacob things that he thought would make his stay in prison more comfortable. The sad news overshadowed the happy event of Jacob's release. Henry Gomez had died 6 months before his release. He was not able to say goodbye to his grandfather. Despite all of the emotions that rushed through Jacob when he heard this bad news, he was unable to change what was going to happen. While his grandson was in prison, Mr. Gomez's health problems, which started before Jacob was locked up, became more frequent and severe. Jacob's thoughts were rushing in his head as he walked through the gates of the prison. He thought to himself, "All I had to do was take care of my grandfather and make sure he was healthy." That realization weighed on him heavily. On one hand, he was excited about his release, and on the other, he was feeling sad. The fact that he knew he was going back to a lonely house without any friendly faces took away from the joy of his freedom. While he was on the bus, Jacob looked out the window and let his thoughts drift into the distance. Jacob had a hard time focusing on choosing the most appropriate action when he left the prison and went out into the real world. He was feeling a lot of different emotions. He was always thinking about the future, and his mind was full of ideas. This created a mental chaos that made making decisions hard and complicated for the newly freed person. But Jacob knew one thing for sure. He was going to start over with his life. The bad path he had been taking and his dreams of getting rich quickly would end. The winding road curved through the dense forest, making it like an endless green tunnel that led to a completely unknown world. As Jacob sat by the window, he kept feeling that the tall pine trees outside were slowly closing in on the bus and inviting it into their world. It was like he had a subtle link to nature that was pulling at the edges of his mind, and being lost in thought for a while, he finally realized that his stop was coming up quickly. He asked the bus driver to stop and he got off the bus. Jacob got off the bus with his backpack slung over his shoulder. He stood by the side of the road and breathed in the fresh air that smelled like pine trees. He was filled with an enticing sense of freedom, and he was also aware that this happiness would not last. There was a hint of sadness in his heart that came from missing his grandfather, and soon the excitement of freedom would wear off and the routine of daily life would take its place, getting a job and getting used to the new rhythm. Jacob felt strangely uneasy as he got closer to his house. As he walked down the streets with his huge suitcase, people looked at him strangely, as if they were still suspicious of him because he was still wearing the clothes he had worn while he was in jail. Of course, those ideas were very far from the truth. When Jacob got to his door, he couldn't get rid of the strange feeling that was with him. Before doing what he always did, which was lift the carpet at the front door and find the key, he quickly looked around, just like his grandfather had taught him. With a smile, Jacob opened the door, walked across the fence and into the building. With each step, he remembered his grandfather's lessons. Even as Jacob went deeper into the house, he noticed a strong smell of medicine and a strange, almost alien smell that filled the air and made it feel damp. He couldn't help but admire the order that remained on each part of the large house. Even with all the different smells going on around him, each thing kept its correct spot, and each of them reminded him of the past. It seemed like Henry Gomez had just left for a moment to do his usual grocery shopping and was about to come back at any time. However, Jacob knew that his grandfather wasn't going to come back, except in his memories, where the most important parts of his life were carefully stored away, even though things seemed to be in order. There was a thin layer of dust covering everything, which made Jacob think about the idea of going into a big cleaning rush. After 6 months, the house that had been fully functional before Gomez's death was slowly falling apart. During the last few hours of the day, Jacob started a very thorough cleaning mission, giving each room his full attention. It was while he was cleaning that he found himself wandering through the halls of his own past, remembering a time when he was happy and leaned on his grandfather for everything. His thoughts about the past brought back painful memories and a deep appreciation for the part his grandfather had played in shaping his life. Jacob developed the habit of taking short walks outside on occasion, savoring the amazing feeling of freedom that surrounded him. As part of his daily routine, these breaks were necessary to balance out his relentless work ethic, which, by the time evening came around, left him completely and totally worn out. After a meal of store-bought hamburgers, Jacob quickly decided to go to bed because his back hurt and his limbs felt weak. The effort he put in was physically demanding, which was different from his usual work routine and forced him to face a new kind of exhaustion. Something very different from what he had been through in jail happened to Jacob that he hadn't seen in a long time. He fell asleep surprisingly quickly. His mind was no longer limited by the walls of the prison. He'd often been filled with anxious thoughts about his long-awaited release. During his time of rest, he had a dream that changed his life. The dream, which was a strange meeting with his dead grandpa, Henry, who seemed to be very much alive, came to an end with an unexpected sense of hurry. After smiling warmly and familiarly, the elderly figure changed dramatically. The dream revealed a significant event, as Henry urged Jacob to find his cabin in the woods. Even though Jacob tried to have a conversation, his dream self had trouble speaking and said words that weren't clear. As the dream went on, Henry Gomez's figure faded away, leaving behind the order, "Find the cabin, Jacob." The instruction was repeated over and over in the dream, like a mysterious call that lingered even as the dream started to disappear. The harshness and instance in Henry's words left a lasting mark, leaving Jacob to think about the strange call when he woke up. When Jacob woke up, he was drenched in a cold sweat and his eyes were moving nervously to the doorway, as if he was expecting to see someone who wasn't there. However, the silence in the house made him even more aware of the fact that he was awake, alone, and had no one else with him. He could no longer remember the detailed scenes that had happened in his dreams. All that was left was a vague picture of the plot. His grandfather's words got rooted in his mind, and he was not able to shake them off. The connection to a cabin was clear to Jacob, but its meaning was unclear. In his mind, the cabin, a small hunting lodge tucked away in the forest, became a safe place for lost tourists and hunters to go when things got bad. Jacob felt very confused as he thought about why his grandfather wanted him to go to this cabin. It didn't seem very important. Why did this cabin hold such profound significance? Jacob was confused by the question. Even though he didn't believe in superstitions, the strange dream made him feel a lot of doubt and confusion. The logical mind trying to figure out what Henry was trying to say by thinking that there had to be a reason for telling him to go to that house. Although Jacob had already eaten breakfast, the dream was still fresh in his mind. Perhaps he was trying to send me a sign or something, Jacob thought to himself. His mind was full of thoughts. The cabin's enigma, wrapped in a dream, had drawn Jacob into a waking reality, inviting him to unravel its mysteries and find the profound meaning in a departed grandfather's words. Because he didn't have any important plans that day, Jacob made up his mind to go to the woods and figure out what was going on with the old hunting house. What does this mean? Walking in nature might help Grandpa. He imagined finding peace for his deceased grandfather. With this goal in mind, Jacob carefully planned his trip into the woods, making sure he had everything he needed for the trip. He didn't plan to use the rifle, but he brought it along with him with some food because he was looking forward to a full investigation. Because he could remember everything so well, Jacob quickly found his way along the trails and arrived at the hunter's house in a very short time. The cabin in the forest was still recognizable, but there were subtle signs of times passing. For example, the chimney was slightly displaced and the house looked worn down all around. Such small changes were expected for a hidden forest house. In this peaceful setting of nature, Jacob was trying to figure out what his grandfather's mysterious order meant. What did Grandpa want from me? Why reveal this place in a dream, he thought. As Jacob got closer to the cabin entrance, he looked at the open door and guessed that it was probably empty. As soon as the young man stepped inside the house, he realized something strange. Odd noises were coming from inside. Jacob was surprised to find that the house wasn't as empty as he had thought at first. He saw a boy and a girl, both no more than 5 years old, pressed against the cabin wall as soon as the door opened. Their faces were filled with fear. The unexpected meeting added a layer of mystery to the story, and Jacob had to think about what the unexpected finding meant. Jacob was paralyzed by the children's unexpected presence in the hunting cabin. "Why are you here?" he asked in shock. How did you end up in the hunting cabin?" He was trying to figure out what was going on. Once the kids got over their shock, they looked at each other and smiled, but you could tell they were uncomfortable. The oldest of them worked up the nerve to say, "Sir, we got lost. It happened yesterday. We went into the forest to watch squirrels, and before we knew it, we were totally lost. When we found this house by accident, we went inside to hide." At that moment, things became clear, and he understood the deep meaning behind his late grandfather's vague dream directions. Inspired by compassion, he gave the kids a comforting hug and offered to take them back to their house. The young girl was scared when she saw the gun, but Jacob's words made her feel better. "Don't worry, sweetheart, I won't hurt you," he told her. "I brought it more for show than anything else." This made her smile, and she put out her hand to Jacob with newfound confidence. The older of the two kids, who was less likely to show affection, kept a calm reaction and didn't trust a stranger walking among them right away. Jacob found out that the lost kids' names were Molly and Liam. As the story unfolded, he learned this while taking turns carrying the kids and giving their little legs a break. It was a lucky coincidence that Jacob's path crossed with that of the search members and their dogs as they got closer to the edge of the woods. Even though the search group worked hard all night, they didn't know about the hunting cabin, as they were looking on the other parts of the woods. Jacob's dream's unexpected guidance led to the children's fortunate rescue. The grandpa's words led him to find Molly and Liam's hidden refuge in time, saving them from hunger and dehydration. The mysterious dream triggered the fortunate reunion, making Jacob an accidental but crucial player in Molly and Liam's rescue. When the lost kids were found, the mayor of the town was pleased and thanked everyone. He put out his hand to Jacob and said, "I think we found our new forester, young man." He was really excited about the idea of Jacob protecting the edges of the state's forest and making sure they were safe for everyone. Right away, Jacob's face lit up with a warm smile, as if the thought of a new purpose gave him light. With a sense of relief washing over him, Jacob gave Molly and Liam a playful wink. After some time of not knowing if he would have a job again, the mayor's proposal sounded surreal to him. The once uncertain future now opened up like a canvas of possibilities, and the job of guarding the state's forest called to Jacob. It sounded like a rewarding journey, and he accepted it with hope and determination. The cabin was more than just a safe place for two lost teens to stay. It was key to solving the mystery in Jacob's dream. Jacob took on the role of forester and used his new authority to stop illegal hunting and uncontrolled deforestation, which made the people in the town feel an enormous amount of peace. Their deep love for nature found solace in Jacob's governance. Balancing humanity and nature, almost every week, Jacob made the small trip to the place where his grandpa was buried. This time, though, there was a small change in their routine. He held a bouquet of flowers that came straight from the trees that had become his nature friends. It was like each flower had its own story, and the words from the trees connected with Jacob's very being. He carefully placed the floral gifts on the gravestone with respect, while Jacob's eyes filled with tears. He intuitively looked up, finding comfort in the enormity of the sky, from where Jacob hoped his father was watching and guiding him through life. In this balanced connection between guardian and guide, Jacob found not only a sense of purpose, but also a deep link to his grandfather's lasting impact. Henry taught him many things, but Jacob's unwavering dedication as a forester made sure that those lessons would never be forgotten. Every tree he took care of and choice he made in the woods became a live example of the wisdom that had been passed down from generation to generation. But as the years and seasons went by, there was a surprise turn in the story. One day, Jacob was walking up to the familiar grave when he saw a small tree growing next to where his grandpa was buried. When he realized this, he felt a deep sense of amazement. Maybe by taking care of nature, he was unknowingly continuing the cycle that had shaped his life. As he stood there, the soft rustling of leaves and the touch of a breeze filled Jacob with a deep warmth. It was a reassurance that his link with Henry was not stuck in the past, but was a living, changing bond that went beyond time.